What's shakin' bacons? It is summer, and that means, of course, it is time for summertime superhero blockbuster movies, and I couldn't wait for this movie to come out because, in case you guys couldn't tell for some reason, I may or may not be a bit of a fan of the Marvel Universe, so I was very excited to go see Ant-Man and the Wasp. This first review is going to be non-spoilers, so you don't have to worry about scooching along. And then we can dive in and talk about spoilers in an upcoming separate video that'll be out soon. It's hard to talk about this movie without spoiling the actual plot line, so this will be completely spoiler-free. Do I need to tell you guys that it's gonna be spoiler-free anymore? It's gonna be spoiler-free. I very much so enjoyed the first Ant-Man, as I think a lot of people did. So I was looking forward to this follow-up, this sequel. I really like that Marvel takes risks on less popular or less conventional superheroes and characters the way that they do with Ant-Man and the way that they did with Guardians of the Galaxy. And something I like even more about Ant-Man in particular is that Scott Lang is not a perfect superhero, nor does he pretend to be. He's also very human. His motivations are all human. He doesn't behave like other superheroes do in that they feel they're above the law or they're going to ignore local stipulations, or for example, like the Avengers ended up completely blowing aside the Sokovia Accords. Scott Lang, in comparison to other superheroes, is very much so tied to the law. We are introduced to him when he's in prison, and everything about him is truly tied to his family. I don't think even Hawkeye, who has a full family, is quite as tied to society itself as Ant-Man is, and that makes this character very interesting because characters that aren't perfect at everything they do are more relatable and they seem more real to us, and that makes us as an audience invest in them more than we would otherwise. And I think that's one reason why, despite them not being the incredibly popular superheroes and most well-known superheroes out of the Marvel Universe, why they have become so popular with audiences. And Ant-Man and the Wasp does revolve around character imperfections. Not just Scott's, but of all those involved, from Hank to Hope to Luis, for God's sake. And it is a very enjoyable movie. It is directed, of course, by Peyton Reed, who returned from directing the first Ant-Man. It hits most of the right notes for a good summer superhero movie with the story and with the characters, with a few exceptions, which I'm going to talk about vaguely enough so that it shouldn't spoil too much. It's got a lot of traditional flaws from which many superhero movies suffer. At this point, I feel Marvel should be better at catching these and working around them and circumventing these flaws, because I've come to expect a higher level from them, especially based on the last couple films. So that was disappointing to me, and that was one reason why I deducted some points on my movie rating for this film. The movie explains why Ant-Man isn't present during Infinity War, and you see the events unfolding in this movie that involve Ghost and involves the lab that is shown in the trailer, and the plot revolves around them working on a central quest and having to deal with a bunch of setbacks and villain type characters along the way. That's really all I can say about this movie that isn't spoiling it, because that's all the trailers show, and this is one of those rare birds, it feels these days, where the trailer does not show what the actual plot is at all. If I talk any further about what the story is actually like, I'm going to spoil it. I'm not going to continue talking about the story. I'm just going to talk about the stuff that's not going to ruin things for you. The trailers actually so seriously misdirect you that I thought I was kind of going crazy, and I rewatched all the trailers I could find for Ant-Man and the Wasp just to make sure that I wasn't confused. Sure enough, they don't show the real plot at all. The center point of the real plot is actually revolving around something else entirely, and what's shown in the trailers are peripheral events that happen as this primary plot unfolds. The movie is, quite frankly, it's charming. The actual plot has a major large issue from me, aside from actually contradicting itself within the space of the 2 hours that the movie takes, regarding Scott's shrinking and growing giant and his energy levels associated with that. This flaw is what I referenced earlier when I talked about there is a commonality when it comes to issues that movies have in terms of villains or plot development. I find it really lazy writing when movies invent old colleagues or acquaintances or backstory that gets shoved very rapidly down the throat of the audience as a form of exposition to hastily justify and create history for a character that was created or wrapped in purely for the sake of the sequel's plot, or they fail to fold them into the story organically. I just think it's really lazy, and this movie suffers greatly from that. And I mean greatly suffers from this. This happens with 2 of the 3 major antagonists in this movie. All of them, by the way, are super obvious and predictable. You know exactly who it's going to be and where it's going to be going. You know where the plot's going to go, and you kind of know what's already going to happen for the most part in this film. In addition to this, the acting of one of the primary antagonists is incredibly subpar. And for most of the movie, it kind of looks like she is flipping through a book of 3 primary expressions that she's choosing from for each scene. The subpar acting coupled with a bad backstory for that character means that the villain just was not believable for me. But aside from the antagonists, every single character is very well developed. And they were further expanded from the first movie, and they're all very unique. They all have very vibrant personalities. The personalities are really what shine in Ant-Man. The main issue that the story has is truly the villains. They suffer from classic movie villainitis, if you will. They're just not believable, they're just very stereotypical, and the entire aspect of the villains felt tacked on, and it felt boring. What's great though is that there are a lot of genuine, funny, witty moments with this movie, like very, very funny. I laughed the whole way. It's funny not only in terms of line delivery and in the acting, comedic timing, different jokes that they make.
Or maybe even just a suit with no powers. No.
But also just there are visual moments in this that are very, very funny. Just glimpses you get like with the Hello Kitty Pez missile, just the absurdity of seeing it topple through San Francisco, or you can see character expressions in the background that are very amusing. There are truly comedic moments that focus on the human aspect of things, like personality quirks, different bantering and back and forth that they have.
Is that my desk? Yeah.
Why do I have such a small desk?
Because you weren't there when we were choosing desks. You snooze, you lose.
Well, I was under house arrest.
Yeah.
Guys! Hope, come on. We gotta focus.
There's an online magic course that gets featured quite a bit throughout this movie. There's drumming scenes. There's a character's irrational fear of Baba Yaga. Luis completely panics at several points. The sheer juxtaposition of how big Scott gets in the movie compared to everyone else who is very tiny, and when he is normally very tiny, and when he attacks, he just like flicks weapons away and goes doink. It's very, very funny. I laughed the whole way, and I realize this is kind of short compared to what I normally do, but I can't expand further on this film without giving away major spoilers, because as I said, the entirety of the plot, what the actual plot is a major spoiler. Let's talk about my rating, and we'll get to it in the spoilers video. Per my rating scale, Ant-Man and the Wasp gets a pretty respectable 84%. There's a few inconsistencies and issues with the story. There's some acting problems and predictability, and that's what really brought the score down for me. But overall, Ant-Man and the Wasp is highly enjoyable. I laughed the entire way through it. I left it feeling great. It is a wonderful summer blockbuster to go and just enjoy yourself at the theater. And dare I say, I think it might have been even more fun than the first one, simply because we're revisiting characters that we already knew we enjoyed, and you get to learn more about them and see how they develop. It's very, very enjoyable. This is a great Marvel movie, although it does leave you wanting to tear your hair out because, oh, that end scene though. There are 2 end scenes. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, if you're planning to see it in theaters, which I do recommend, the second end scene, in my opinion, at the very end of the credits is not worth staying for. It's a few seconds long. It's just really not, you're not gonna miss anything. However, the first end scene is very kind of like I highly recommend staying for the first end scene. What did you guys rate this movie? Have you seen it yet? Do you plan on seeing it? I'd be interested to know if your ratings are close to mine. Join me for the spoilers discussion. We can get a little more in depth. Let me know what you guys think. In the meantime, please feel free to hit subscribe if you'd like, and apparently ring a bell if you want to get notified when I do new videos, and I will catch you later.